Welcome back, everyone. This is Dani from Eterneva. I'm so excited to be doing our 5th week now of Instagram Live series. We have an amazing guest today. I will be letting her on right now, actually. And we'll be having another Dani to go with your Donnie. So hold tight. Also, hello to everybody that is joining. Hello!
Hi.
Welcome. Okay, so everybody, this is Dani Hart, a growth gal. She's an absolutely amazing writer, yogi, very multi-talented, kind of everything lady. And I'm so happy to have you here on our IG Live today. So thank you so much and welcome.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Today, everyone, just so you know, we wanted to delve in a little bit in the topic of self-love and self-quarantine. Just because, it's been a few weeks now. I think we've all been at home. And so I know you've been writing and doing a lot of research into this topic. I think it'd be amazing first if you could share a little bit about yourself and like what you do, and then we can go right into it.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. So hi, everybody. Ooh, it's storming here. It just started thundering, so hopefully that doesn't interrupt anything. So my name is Dani, and let's see, I started kind of my career in the tech world and ended up burning out, and I was just so fascinated by the idea of burning out, and I had worked at least one job, usually two jobs, since I was 14. And at 28 years old, I was like, it's kind of young to be burning out. What's going on here? And so I became fascinated about like what personality and um, just how we live our lives, like how that manifests into either burnout or not burning out. And what the term that I kept coming up that I was like really fascinated by was resilient. That's kind of the ability to come back after setbacks and the ability to learn from challenges and become stronger on the tail end of, everything that you experience. So I started researching that with the team at SciML. So SciML just stands for Psychology and Machine Learning. The CEO of that company is actually the former chief science officer at eHarmony. So he was responsible for 4% of Americans' marriages with his algorithms, which are all built, at the time they were built on the Ocean framework, and now we use the Hexaco personality framework. So I've been working with him and that team as a writer ever since, and I dive into really helping people understand their personalities and how they can use their own strengths and opportunities to use their personality to their advantage, but also be aware of challenges that everybody's personality will inhibit at some point, and especially under stress. We're finding that a lot of times personalities shift a little bit during periods of stress, and it's just a state that somebody's going through. But that to me is also very fascinating because I even learned about myself. My stress response is to tend and befriend, which is like to reach out to a lot of other people and find out how they're doing. And sometimes I don't think about myself, but I also get very critical. And so while I'm reaching out, I might not always be the best person to be reaching out because I might be actually invoking fear in other people, which isn't good. So anyway, that's a long kind of winded explanation of what I'm doing, but I actually found Eterneva the end of last year, and that was after coming back from about 8 months living in Europe and really dealing with a lot of isolation and loneliness and grief. I lost my grandmom at the beginning of the trip, and so I was just kind of like moping around a lot, and really had the great opportunity to work with Eterneva to write about some of those experiences and learn more about grief and death and really just study it myself, which I think is something that we can all do, especially with this much time by ourselves.
Yeah. Oh my God. And we're so happy to have you here. For everyone that is joining now, she is absolutely like amazing. She's written so many blog posts for us. So definitely go check those out as well. You talk a lot about like psychology and research into people. So I feel like you probably talk to a lot of people day to day, and your work has an enormous amount of compassion that comes with it. I think we would love to know kind of like what kind of things do you seem to like stumble across like that are patterns across all of us, and what tactics have you seen help people in times like right now, where it's so easy just to like lay the land. It's so easy for us to be hard on ourselves right now. Like I know even the people on the other end, like it's easy to beat yourself up for everything changing and like not really knowing how to deal with it. And Dani, I feel like you understand this space really well. So if you could just kind of share how people can help like navigate this, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too that all of us, well, not all of us, but a lot of us in the US specifically are dealing with an unprecedented amount of stress prior to this happening, prior to the pandemic happening. And that was one thing that we studied at Payoff when I actually met Dr. Galen Buckwalter, is we were studying how acute financial stress can impact people. And we found that a quarter of Americans and a third of US American millennials were dealing with acute financial stress, which had the same symptoms as PTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder is, you know, a phenomenon that is not only limited to veterans, although that's where I think it maybe became more popularized because there's some very traumatic events that people have to experience in wartime. And so that's where it got really popular, but you can experience post-traumatic stress from watching someone get in a motorcycle accident in front of you, or, you know, there's a wide variety of what post-traumatic stress can look like, but at the end of the day, it sends the body into fight or flight mode. And so that is our body's stress response. That's basically saying, I'm being threatened and I need to protect myself. And so a lot of times what happens is people in this stress mode, they look at everything from a very critical standpoint, and because they're trying to protect themselves, right? They're trying to say, what are all these potential threats and how do I navigate those? When in reality, like, those threats are not realistic, or maybe they are, but they're not something that we really need to worry about on a day-to-day basis. Like, we can drive ourselves crazy. So I think that was like my initial aha, was like, we're all already dealing with this amount of stress, and now we're compounding on top of that, like a pandemic that none of us have seen. We have media that we can consume 24/7, which, you know, the last pandemic that the US or the world saw, they didn't have that exposure to media. You know, it was like you'd watch TV here and there if you were lucky enough to have a TV. But now we have this onslaught of media that is making things in our faces. So we're very aware of everything going on. And that's just so much for the human mind to process, and let alone like thrive after, you know, experiencing that. Like it's a process that we need to all go through. And I think you're spot on with, you know, treating everything patiently. That's something that, and I can talk about like setting intentions in a little bit, but that was one intention that I set when I burned out from, you know, the tech world. I was like, you know what, I just need to be patient. I need to be patient with myself, that I'm not producing all the time. You know, we're always doing one thing after another, and it's hard to keep up in this day and age. And that was one thing that I said, I'm going to be more patient. And so anytime I was getting frustrated, I came back to patience. Okay, how can I have patience here? And that helped me build patience. It took 1.5 years to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm a little bit more patient now. And it takes time, but it's possible.
Oh, 100, like something you said that resonated so hard that I don't think people here realize. Like I work in social media all the time, but even like when I was growing up, like this is not a distant future, y'all. Like Twitter and all that kind of stuff, you didn't get to see all the day-to-days and like what was happening around you. You didn't get to see like all the positive and negative or whatever it is. We have so much information coming in that maybe we didn't have the literacy to deal with sometimes. And we're so hard on ourselves because we're seeing it on like a global scale. And I feel like just remembering that like the world is big out there is important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
100% though. And I feel you with that patience thing, because I think that's kind of what came out of this whole literacy thing, is that we've all become these incredibly like impatient human beings that think things just kind of happen, and we've just become so hard on ourselves. And that's why I think it's amazing to talk to you, because we all need reminders of like, okay, how can we slow down? Like, what are ways that we can like practice more patience, or like loving ourselves, or compassion, and all those things. So
yeah. Yep, absolutely. And I think it was really telling for me when I first got to Europe, because they moved at such a slower pace. And, you know, maybe that's because of they have a history, right? Europe has like a very deep history of wars and, you know, just like a lot of conflict. And so maybe they've come out of that a little bit stronger and they value things like family and time in nature and whatever it is. But in the US, I just felt like we were always like looking to that next milestone and never really taking a step back to say like, hey, am I even still on the right staircase? You know, for long-term happiness, let alone short-term happiness.
Yeah. What are some good ways? Like, I know all of us are obviously forced to do this now, like take a step back and look. Like, you talked a lot about practicing patience, especially in times of burnout, which don't know for all of you out there, but I've just been seeing so many messages around burnout and things like that right now. It doesn't even matter. It feels like for a lot of us, the world is kind of crashing down. What have you done that's helped you like recultivate that kind of, like you said, it took you 1.5 years to regain it, and some of us are starting this process now. Like, what does it look like, or what does it look like?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be a lifelong journey for me, to be honest. Like, I don't think it's ever something that you just solve. Patience, that is, but I think it starts with being intentional, right? And saying that this is something that you're committed to, and that being patient with yourself, being patient with other people. But the biggest like tip that I had that really helped me was turning any time that I was frustrated or feeling anxious or anything and just asking the question, what can I learn from this? Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, it was something about myself that I was learning, right? Because in any situation that you're in, there's one thing that you can control, and that's the way that you choose to react to something or not react. You know, like when we're in work situations or family situations, we can't always control other people and how they react and how they choose to live their lives. Which has been a hard lesson for me too, because, you know, I used to grow up thinking like I can change my parents and get them to believe what I believe, but that it's not true. And I was driving myself crazy, like trying to do that. So patience is absolutely like learning from everything that's in front of you and looking at everything as a learning opportunity. And it's less thinking about things as stress and more as this is a challenge, and that you get to experience this challenge and come out on the other end a better version of yourself.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that so much. Like, it's all about like, it's almost like constant awareness and reframing, you know, like, because I definitely do this, and this is probably the hardest part of my self-love, I guess, practice, is that it's so easy to spiral into, you know, something that totally takes you away from that or takes you away from yourself. And I find that the hardest thing is like coming back, you know, recentering and all that. I would love to, like, I think starting with that question is amazing. You know, how can I learn from the situation to help you recenter? But definitely in times like these, I know people have so many, like those, even that's hard. Are there other ways that you found have helped you recenter yourself in addition to that too?
Yeah, I think it starts with like really understanding how stress impacts you. Because it's profound. I mean, a lot of disease even comes from compounding stress over decades. And you know, like I can see it, like people that have lived like extremely stressful times, and they're like the most stressed, and they perceive stress as stress, right? Like something, a burden on them. And like the next year they end up having cancer or something. And I'm not saying that there's a direct tie, but I definitely think stress has a bigger role to play in our health than we realize. And it's because our society is built on stressing people out, right? Like we need to consume things, we need to buy things, we need to produce those things. And I'm sorry if everybody's hearing those sirens, because that's the last thing that I want to be putting out there. But yeah, I think it starts with understanding, like, what does your body look like when it's under stress? What does your mind look like under stress? And what do those what does that look like? So that way you can know, hey, this is a perfect time for self-care. And that might mean saying, you know what, I'm going to take the rest of the day off as a personal health day or whatever it may be, and saying, I know that these 5 things make me happy and they put me back into my centered place. So I'm going to do at least one of those. And then you go through that list of what that is for yourself and say, all right, today I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to schedule out maybe like 2 or 3 things in the coming days, so that I keep it as a routine and not as something that you're being reactionary with. It's a more preventative approach. But I mean, when you hit that point though, you have to take a step back and get out of the fight or flight mode, because you're not going to approach any kind of problem or anything with a solid frame of reference.
Yeah, 100%. Like even and it's funny because a lot of us, or some of us, have worked remotely before, but this is, I think, the first time that it's so collective, where, you know, everyone has to kind of find new ways of like approaching their technology. Like even for me, I think putting my phone on do not disturb mode after 6 p.m. has been incredible, because it's funny, like they're literally glued to us all the time, but then now I think we're being forced to be more conscious about it, which is kind of beautiful in a way. I think right now it's stressful, but it's cool that we're maybe becoming aware of how these things are really interacting with our lives.
Yeah, and I kind of look at like my burnout as a benefit, like that, experiencing it, you know, a couple of years ago, because and it was physical. Like I started getting migraines, I started not wanting to wake up in the morning, and just like it was bad, and I knew that I wasn't living like the life that I wanted to be living, and so I needed to start making those changes to get there. And I realized that a lot of it was like stress that I had carried with me. I remember, and it's funny, my brother's girlfriend just joined. Hi, Katie. But it wasn't until we took a trip to Breckenridge, Colorado for my brother's 30th birthday that I like actually took a step back. Like I just planned a 500 person conference and hosted it. I just launched a website. Like, you know, it was just like da, 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 like right after another, like one thing after another. And that was the first time I actually, like, my body relaxed. I got out into nature. I went to the spa afterwards and like had a hot tub sweat session where, like, you know, I didn't even exist, it felt like, after that. But that's when I started changing my mindset and saying, like, you know what, I'm in this situation. There are things that I can control and there are things that I can't control. I don't want to burn my bridges and just say, hey, you know what, peace out, I'm done with this job. Like, I want to get it to a point where, like, I can exit gracefully. And so for me, that meant changing my mindset to, instead of worrying about all of these metrics that were associated with like the success of the company, I was going to focus on myself, and that was like figuring out what my values are, what my core values are, what my true beliefs are, what my personality is, and then taking those values and building a mindset that fits. So for me, it was, how do I help one person a day, right? So whether that was reaching back out to someone that was trialing our software or whatever, it was a different mindset, and I was still working towards the same goals. So that, yeah, that I think is a long-winded way to answer that, I think.
Oh, for sure. No, it's so funny. Like even like before this, like even this morning for me, from a personal standpoint, millions of emails to answers, all these things that you have to do, you know, and like you're like, oh, I'm about to go live. And I was just like, you know what? Like, there's so many things to be happy about. This song that you like just came on the radio. And, like, I get to talk to something really cool, even though it's live. Like, you know, it's just, like, trying to find those little moments to be proud of yourself or happy. And it's definitely a skill that you have to, like, bring back up again. Because believe me, guys, it doesn't come naturally all the time. But I think it definitely helped, I think, reframe, or that whole mindset, the thing that you were talking about, too.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing, and like being able to study something like PTSD, is like you can see the brain patterns that exist in PTSD patients, and once they get to a point, like, you know, there's cognitive behavioral therapy that people are walked through. So basically different exercises that can help people tackle how to live in a different way, like a different mindset. And it takes training, because what's happening is your brain is very, you can form it, you can change it. It's called neuroplasticity, where you can actually train your brain to exhibit different patterns. And so things like writing down something that you're grateful every day, or taking your stress and naming it, taking your emotions and your thoughts and actually naming them, so that you realize that you're not those things. Those are things that are just passing through you.
Yes. Oh my God, I love the naming, because you can kind of like you call it what it is for that moment, and then maybe it like passes. And like what you just said, like we do that with our thoughts that spiral sometimes. I feel like we give them so much power by giving them like this story that we tell over and over. But I almost want to do it like, I don't know. I think that's like a fascinating thing. These are new ideas for me, at least. And so I would love, like, I don't know if this is an easy one to answer, but like, Do you have a good example of how you've done this in the past too?
In terms of
naming and like how, especially when you have like a difficult emotion or stressor or something that comes into your life, like how would you go about kind of like being aware of it, naming it, and like kind of helping it pass, I guess?
Yeah, I think when it always helps to, if you can actually name what the emotion is that you're experiencing, right? Because then it's like, okay, that's that, right? Like I'm feeling sad. But then you can also dig deeper and say, why am I feeling sad? Well, I'm feeling sad because I was supposed to go on that trip and now the trip is canceled and I may never go on that trip again. I don't know. Okay, well, why did I want to go on that trip so badly? Well, I really wanted to see my family. Okay, well, why did I want to see my family? Because I love them and I value their time. So like, okay, now we can work with that. Now we can get to the root cause of what that emotion is and say, I really miss my family. I want to talk to them. So how do I set that up now with these new constraints? Right? So there's always a way to like, not necessarily change these emotions. I think that you should always experience your emotions for what they are, but you don't want to ruminate in them. You don't want to add fuel to the fire so that the emotions get bigger and bigger. You want to let them flow through you. And so that's just like, okay, here comes the sadness. And what's going on with the sadness? Why? Okay, now I'm going to let that go.
Yeah. Oh my, I love it. It's a pragmatic approach, and it treats our bodies like with the flexibility I think they deserve, you know, which is why I think all this is beautiful. I mean, we're running short, but this has been absolutely amazing. All y'all, like, we're having her back on for sure. Like, you definitely have like so much great information to share, and that's obvious. But if you had any other resources or, you know, things that you've read or anywhere else that you would want to recommend to people, what would that look like? Just so they could learn more about all of this.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I made this little cheat sheet for myself today. Because what I'm going to actually say, and I think I said parts of this, but you know, kind of, this is like a simple framework of rest, reflect, and reset. And so this is kind of pulling everything I've learned from my brain, trying to like put it into some kind of structure that then I can help other people understand. And I think that this is kind of like how you relax as a person. And that if you think of growth, like growth is something I'm obsessed with, right? Like it's in the name, everything. I worked for a company called Growth Hackers as the head of growth, right? So like I had no choice. Yeah. But there was one book called Peak Performance that talks about like how peak performers in every different industry, everything from athletes to lawyers to startup, you know, founders, what they had in common was that they prioritized rest. So stress plus rest equals growth. Well, we're really great at the stress part. We're not so great at the rest. Like we really need to be dedicated about the rest. And so that's the start of this framework, is that it's rest, reflect, and then reset. So rest meaning, how do you get your body out of fight or flight mode? How do you, you know, what are the things that you know help you get to that centered place? And then the reflect is, you know, things like, what is your stress style? What is your personality? What are your fears? What are your core values and beliefs? How can you live within them even during a crazy time like quarantine? And like, what are the intentions that you set for yourself and different mantras that you use to, you know, that you want to use moving forward? And then the reset is like, how do you make this now part of your daily habit, right? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the part that we were talking about earlier of like, you can be very reactionary, but it's great to be preventative. And by being preventative, it's creating a system for yourself that you know will contribute to your best self. Yeah. And so for that, it could be like channeling stress into positive pressure. So like you were saying, you know, you were feeling overwhelmed, but then it was, hey, I get to talk to Dani. I'm so excited. And then you basically transform that energy into something good. So, and that's how you find meaning in all of these crazy times too. So that's like a very positive thing to do. And then building empathy for yourself and others. There's a lot of great resources for that. Things like mirroring and, you know, just understanding how to negotiate in a healthy way and set boundaries. I think that burnout is like a great way to understand what boundaries you need in life. Because you can kind of see like, hey, these things, when I didn't do these things or when I did do these things, that's when I like I didn't take care of myself, or I didn't live within my values, and then I ended up not wanting to do anything. So yeah, there's, I've got this. I think what I need to do is just turn this into a blog post. So maybe that's what everybody gets to look forward to. If you just follow me on my Instagram, then I guess I'll get it posted there, or who knows, maybe Eterneva will host it as well. We'll see.
Oh, we would 100% love to. Like, all of your resources, we can share this via stories or make it into posts. Everyone, if this has been Dani Hart at Growth Gal, please go follow her. She has so much amazing knowledge and advice, from being a growth hacker to now just I don't even know what to call you, because it's just amazing.
I don't know either.
But that's how you know you've awakened as a human, and you have all your different parts of life that you kind of brought into your practice, which is so beautiful. And for anyone that caught that, stress plus rest equals growth, because that's definitely what I'm remembering from this, is that, the stress needs to have the balance. So I think that's what's been so beautiful about this conversation, is that
and there is such thing as too much rest, right? Because if you do that, then you become apathetic, and you're just like, I don't want to do anything ever. This is, it's becoming a very stressful cycle, I guess, if you don't constantly try to balance those things.
Yes. And we're all figuring it out as we go along, which I think is very cool.
And I'd love to just also end by just saying, I'm coming on this video chat and I'm sharing what I know because I've been studying it, but at the same time, this isn't easy for anybody. This hasn't been easy for me. I lost my uncle a week into quarantine, and I didn't feel those emotions until a week later, and I got panic attacks for the first time in my life. So I'm also using this framework myself to, help me as well. But I want to just get that out there in the open, because I don't want anybody to feel alone and that they're the only ones struggling in this. We all are in our own ways. And what's beautiful is we can come together and figure out ways forward.
Oh my God, I felt that so hard. We're all even for me, I'll learn a lesson and I learn the same lesson again, maybe even 24 hours later or 2 minutes later. Things just happen this way. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a beautiful, heart-opening session. We look forward to having you on again. Everyone, this has been Dani Hart at Growth Gal. Please give her a follow. And we're going to follow up with all these resources as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, and thank you for having me. This has been fun. So feel free to reach out with any questions to the audience.
Yeah. Have a beautiful day. Bye.
Bye.